The most important thing to note is that flooding occurs in many different ways. Where a river overflows is called riverine or overbank flooding. Germantown is very different. What we experience there, sometimes we call it infrastructure flooding, sometimes it's called urban flash flooding, and that is when the sewer becomes overwhelmed by a lot of rain in a short amount of time. Depending on where you're at, if you're at a low point or if you're at a high point, your experience with flooding can be very different.
Originally, Germantown had the Wingahawken Creek running through it. That, is a watershed, and that's where floodwaters go when we have heavy precipitation events. As we paved over the city, capped our rivers and creeks, and built over top of them, turning that into part of our sewer system, that runoff goes into that sewer system, fills up what would have been the watershed very quickly. That's when we start seeing those backups into people's basements and flooding at the surface because there's just nowhere for that water to go.
Pennsylvania is one of the most flood-prone states in the nation. Okay, it doesn't mean that it's flooding every day. It catches people by surprise, People think that it's not going to happen. If it does happen, it's not going to happen to me. And if it happens to me, there's nothing I can do about it. So let's roll with it. Wrong. You can't just wait for things to happen. You can't just react. You got to be acting purposely.
When I think about the flooding in Germantown, I'm of course reminded of Hurricane Katrina and what that revealed. Almost 2,000 people died, and most were Black, most were poor. Those people were less able to evacuate to withstand this because they had a tough time affording the basics on any given day. We know that poverty and deep poverty are present, and so we have to figure out how to help one another and in a systematic way across the neighborhood. Our emergency prep focuses on the collective and block by block organizing, as well as learning what we can do individually. Getting to know your neighbors, what their needs are, having an inventory of that, learning together, share information, share resources, figuring out places to meet, organizing teams of neighbors so we can respond appropriately.
A lot of people may think that anytime it floods, FEMA should be right there. But the reality is, in order for FEMA to be really involved, we need what's called a presidential disaster declaration. An emergency response works up through the government. Your first responders are your neighbors. It makes sense for communities like the community of Germantown to do what they can to help each other so that they can get back to school, they can get back to work as soon as possible. And that's going to be even more important as we see the impacts from climate change with these high-intensity, short storms that are hard to predict.
We have a citywide task force of many city agencies and federal agencies that are invested in flood mitigation and emergency preparedness and climate resilience. It's not going to be a short process. We're talking about an extremely complex long-term solution to a challenge that has been centuries in the making. It really is a collaborative effort. Many agencies and the community all really have to work together to work out what the future is going to look like.